the problem is not that robotics training doesn't exist. The problem is that it's not standardized. We don't know what's out there. We don't know where it is. We don't know what even a robotics technician is defined by. And we need to fix that problem. So what our consortium, particularly the community colleges and vocational high schools, said is don't create more training. Figure out how to solve this nationwide problem of lack of knowledge and lack of understanding of where and what it is. So we did that.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Kerrie Jordan. Welcome to our show where we hear from the business leaders driving the future of manufacturing. Today, I'm speaking with Ira Moskowitz, CEO of the Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing Institute, also known as the ARM Institute. This organization is a leader in the Manufacturing USA network and revolutionizing the future of manufacturing by integrating people with robotics to tackle national challenges and to create great products. The ARM Institute was established in 2017, functions as a nonprofit, and was originally born out of Carnegie Mellon University. It now has hundreds of members across industry, academia, and government, and focuses on advancing manufacturing through innovations in robotics, AI, and workforce development. I am very much looking forward to this conversation because we're going to cover very important topics to manufacturers, making robotics and AI more accessible, impacts to the economy, dynamics in the manufacturing workforce, and how rewarding a career in robotics can be to encourage new generations to pursue manufacturing. Ira, welcome, and thank you for joining the show.
No, thanks very much for having me. It's a great honor.
Let's get started by getting to know about you and your background. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself and, perhaps how your background has helped to shape your leadership philosophy as a CEO of the ARM Institute?
Oh, sure. Let's first talk a little bit about the ARM Institute, and then I can talk about how I came about to take this job and why it's important. But first of all, as you mentioned, we are one of the national manufacturing institutes. Manufacturing USA is a network of 17 of these national manufacturing institutes. And each of us focuses on a different discipline within advanced manufacturing, but we all have the same mission, which is to accelerate both the development and the adoption of advanced manufacturing technologies across the country, and equally importantly, train the workforce in those technologies. In our case, of course, that means robotics and automation and increasingly artificial intelligence as applied to robotics. But prior to this, I spent most of my career in manufacturing operations, but in the semiconductor industry, starting out a long time ago as a production manager responsible for all the hourly factory workers on the factory floor, to eventually running factories myself, and then finally heading up the U.S. manufacturing operations of a large U.S. semiconductor company. However, the semiconductor industry is sort of, unfortunately, a great example of how the United States offshored its manufacturing, and with that, its manufacturing technology and a good deal of innovation. When I started way back in the sort of 80s, the industry came up with this great idea, which was, we could concentrate on designing chips in our countries, and we could let Taiwan and other Southeast Asia countries actually manufacture them. And in fact, we helped Taiwan learn how to manufacture chips, so we could just design them. Well, many, many decades later, it turns out that manufacturing and innovation are heavily intertwined. So if we offshore manufacturing, we offshore our manufacturing innovation, and therefore we offshore a lot of our design innovation as well. And then, of course, the COVID pandemic showed us what happens when your supply chains get tight because they are overseas and they're not domestic, and you lose control. And that's generated the CHIPS Act here in the U.S. and many other national responses. So when the offer came up to head up the ARM Institute, which is devoted to strengthening our U.S. manufacturing and bring back our manufacturing supply chains, it was really a great opportunity for me to give back and play a role in reversing this trend of offshoring that has happened over so many years.
What an exciting calling to be a part of this organization. And as you said, really working towards, the future here and building our workforce and the skills required is, I'm sure, a very important endeavor. Can you talk a little bit about how the ARM Institute is focusing on education, fostering a career in robotics, really to ensure that the manufacturing workforce has those skills necessary?
Absolutely. So there's two dimensions to what we do in workforce. One of those has to do with the way we, and by the way, all the 17 institutes form their consortiums. So just a little bit on the consortium, because it's really key to all 17 of these national institutes. The institutes are commissioned to assemble all of the leading entities and therefore, by the way, the leading minds in the country across industry, academia, and government in their particular discipline, again, in our case, robotics, automation, and AI. So our consortium is about 430 members now, and it really includes all the major suppliers of industrial robots to the U.S., all the largest defense contractors, but also over 150 small and medium-sized companies, many of them startups. So we have the full industry spectrum, but to complete the picture, we have the full academic spectrum. So as members, we have most of the leading universities do research in robotics. We also have dozens and dozens of community colleges, vocational high schools, workforce investment boards, boot camps, the entire spectrum of educators in robotics manufacturing as well. And on the government side, we have Department of Labor, Department of Education, as well as NIST and NIOSH, Army, Air Force, and so on. So we have the whole consortium, the whole ecosystem. And what that has done for us, and by the way, it's similar to the other institutes, it's allowed us to really understand what are the key competencies and skills required in the workforce, what are the key gaps, and therefore be best educated and best knowledgeable and best resourced to resolve those. So in the case of robotics, it turns out that there's a lot of robotics training. Robotics is a fairly mature technology. Robots are a lot like they were 60 years ago. So there's a lot of robotics classes and courses and degrees out there. The problem is that, and what our consortium told us many years ago, is the problem is not that robotics training doesn't exist. The problem is that it's not standardized. We don't know what's out there. We don't know where it is. We don't know what even a robotics technician is defined by. So, and we need to fix that problem. So what our consortium, particularly the community colleges and vocational high schools, said is don't create more training. Figure out how to solve this nationwide problem of lack of knowledge and lack of understanding of where and what it is. So we did that. So we created a system that's called Robotics Career. The website where it lives is roboticscareer.org. And in that system, what we've done over the last number of years is we've collected almost 17,000 robotics training programs, but all of them posted and defined in a standardized competency framework that we developed with the world's experts in robotics training, we're a consortium. So there's like a menu there of the key skills and competencies that particularly robotics technicians need to be successful, as well as other types of jobs in robotics. All 17,000 training programs are described in those particular competencies. And you can do a search on a type of job. You can do a search on your geographic area and find the right robotics training. So employers can go and find the right training for their workers. Prospective workers in robotics can find the right training for them, what they want to learn for the type of job they want in their geographic area. In addition, we do an endorsement program to try to work on the issue of we don't know what the quality is of these programs. So we do kind of an ISO audit for those programs, and we can establish an endorsement program where we go in, we audit them with our experts against the world's class best robotics training, and therefore endorse them as being best in class or help them show their weaknesses, just like you do in an ISO audit, and help them get to be best in class. In addition, in that system, roboticscareer.org is a job matching program. So employers can either post their jobs, but they post them in the standardized competency framework, or we will scan all the big sites, the monsters and all those types of things, and we will cull out of that robotics jobs that are open. We will translate them to the standardized competency framework, and then somebody looking for a job can list their competencies against the standardized framework, and the system will do a match. And they can look in a geography area if they want, or they can look cross-nationally. So we have lots of other features that are coming along in the system. And unlike most of the other institutes, which do develop training programs because their particular technology may have a lack of training, such as, for example, additive manufacturing. There may not be enough training out there, so they may develop training programs. There's plenty of robotics training. What we do is we create a robotics career, and that's our way to try to solve the problem we're facing, where in a few years there could be hundreds of thousands of open jobs in robotics for manufacturing, and we won't have the people to fill them. So that's our part of robotics workforce training, and that's our solution, and that's what we focus on.
Thank you for sharing that, because what we'll do is we'll include those links to those resources in the show notes so anybody listening in can get access. But I have a question for you, and that is, what might be happening in an organization's business that might, trigger somebody to need to reach out to your organization? Or what are some of the best fit scenarios where they would be reaching out? What are those compelling events that might be happening that you would, recommend your services for?
Oh, sure. First of all, as I said before, the whole key to these institutes is the consortium. So it's a membership organization. So you join the membership in order to benefit from being part of the institute, part of the consortium. There's a few key reasons why someone might consider being part of our institute, or by the way, if their interest isn't robotics, but it's additive, or if it's flexible hybrid electronics, or if it's digital enterprise level manufacturing systems, there's an institute for that. There's really an institute for most of the key issues in advanced manufacturing. So this would apply really to anything that people are interested in. In our case, it's of course robotics. But if you think about the reason you would be part of this consortium, and again, we have everything from the top defense contractors, the biggest companies in the world, to tiny little new ventures and small manufacturing sort of mom and pop shops. A lot of those members, but certainly an inherent desire to be part of a membership consortium that is the leaders in every dimension of robotics for manufacturing. So if you want to be in that room, and if you feel your business needs to be at the leading edge of the application of automation robotics to manufacturing, then that's the room you want to be in. It is a membership organization. So part of the deal is we fund projects. We're one of the younger institutes, and over the last 7 years, we funded in technology 120 or more projects. We have gigabytes and gigabytes of intellectual property we've developed. All of that is available for free to all the members and as well as the government, since they're funding it. So if you're a member, you actually get to access to all of the intellectual property we've developed. And when we develop technology, the way we do that is we have various councils, and we look at roadmaps of the most critically needed attributes of robotics for manufacturing. We decide where the gaps are currently that aren't being developed. We take government money, we plug those gaps, we create the technology, we create the IP, and all members get that for free for pre-commercial use. If they want to use it for commercial purposes, they have to pay a license. But the team that developed that was awarded that particular project within the consortium, must give them a license. So to some degree, it's a consortium of the willing. If you think about it, you're going to go to meetings, you're going to contribute to conversations and working groups about technology. You're going to share. If you get on a project, your background IP is yours, but it could get a little bit exposed if you're working with team members that are on your project to develop new IP, but in return for which you get to share in the IP that the entire consortium has developed. So you get access to government money, you get access to our meetings and our other networking events where you get to meet all the leading entities within robotics. So you'll have small startups that are in robotics and they join an institute, whether it be ARM or whatever field they're in. And all of a sudden they're in there with all of the leading suppliers to robotics, all of the leading universities that do research in robotics, all of the leading companies that either make or use robots, and you're in the room and you get contact information. You get to be able to network with these entities. We're a Department of Defense funded institute. So we have a lot of the acquisition folks and the purchasing folks and the leadership in the Department of Defense in meetings, interacting with our members. So if you're a small defense contractor, or even if you're not, but you'd like to be, all of a sudden you can go to an event that's hosted by ARM members only, and you'll have leadership of the Department of Defense coming into these kind of meetings. But if you're a big OEM, there's this huge amount of these new ventures out there that have technology, small manufacturers that could be partners. You may never have heard of these people before, but because you're part of the institute, you get to engage. So the real key, why do people join any of these institutes, is by being a member of the institute, you get to be within this consortium that represents the leading entities within the entire ecosystem across the country. And that's really why people join. It's to be in that kind of room and in that space, share an intellectual property that has been developed under the government funding. But most importantly, I think to a lot of members who don't really want to be on projects with others, it's the ability to identify all of the leading entities that are within that particular field. So that's why I think it's It's not for everybody. We have 430 members. We're growing very strongly. We don't do a lot of recruiting. We target individual companies we think would be good for the consortium. We're always happy to bring in more members, but I think that's really true of all the institutes.
Incredible learning opportunity once I can imagine a member is a part of that, to have that kind of exposure and access. What key initiatives or projects does ARM oversee to support robotics adoption in manufacturing?
So again, we're 7 years old now, so we're among the younger institutes. We've completed, as I said, well over 100 projects. Probably 200 gigabytes of intellectual property have been created over the last 7 years, again, all shared by the consortium. And what we do, we're a real manufacturing institute. So, we really focus on those kind of hardcore manufacturing problems. It's painting and coating and scraping and reworking and inspection and welding and casting and forging, all those types of really kind of heavy industry issues. But a lot of those has to do with reducing the risk of integrating a robot into an operation, increasing the flexibility and the adaptability of robots so they can do different tasks within an operation and not just be programmed to do one task. We work on the whole area of human-robot interaction. So the way the world is going in advanced manufacturing is robots working with people as collaborative robots, or cobots they're called. So we work in that space. And above all, we work on advancing the intelligence of robots as applied to manufacturing. This is not generative AI. This is making robots smarter and more capable of working on flexible tasks and working with people. So within all of that, we develop these kind of capabilities for robots, and then we develop them to be able to improve on applications such as scraping and casting and drilling and inspection and assembly and pick and place and those types of traditional manufacturing areas.
Could you share some successful outcomes that you've seen as a result from these efforts, really to accelerate the adoption of robotics technologies, provide workforce training, but also as these organizations are bringing in the robotics, what kind of outcome has that created for their organizations?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that I think we have to talk about first is the kind of false narrative that robots take away jobs. So we don't work in that space. And by the way, I've been in manufacturing for many decades, and this is a fact. It doesn't mean it's true for everybody, but I've never worked with a manufacturer that instituted robotics to replace somebody. The reason why we develop automation robotics within ARM, and in really most cases, is because it's a job that's a new type of job that a human can't do, or it's very dangerous or dirty, or things that human beings with brains shouldn't be doing, particularly in a very, very low unemployment environment where nobody can hire enough folks. Or it's just a standard repetitive dull task and the human being is really needed elsewhere. So we really create applications where the human is still there. It's just the thing goes much, much faster and better. The human's doing something much more capable that humans can do, and there's an overall return on the investment. So, for example, is a painting project we did, where previously there was a large piece of gear and a person had to gown up in a completely protective suit in this very awkward, confined space and try to spray paint this complicated large object. And it was very slow. It was toxic in the environment, and it was hard for a human to do it with any kind of high quality. So we developed an automated solution where the same human being who knows the process is now outside the room looking in, programming an intelligent robot that can almost autonomously go around and do this job guided by the human. And it can do it faster. They can do it absolutely precisely. And it's an overall net positive return for the company. Meanwhile, the human out there, because of their positive return, is actually doing a job that's much more interesting and probably at a higher pay rate than they were doing before, just taking the spray gun and just randomly spraying a piece of equipment. Over and over again, those are the kind of things that we do. The same thing in welding jobs, where we have a very experienced welder, but it's slow and it's dangerous and it's difficult. And so we'll develop an automated solution where now the welder is now trained how to program and maintain a robot, and the whole thing goes much more precisely and faster, and everybody wins. And the person is actually doing a much better job than we're doing before. So over and over again, that's kind of the characteristic of the type of work that we do and the type of results we get. But also very importantly, that you do have that whole human aspect to it. And so that really synchronizes with Robotics Career, the roboticscareer.org system, where we desperately need more people to be trained in this, because this is where manufacturing is going.
Isn't that fascinating? And thank you for dispelling that misconception regarding robotics, taking over, human jobs. It's so fascinating how it really does make these roles more rewarding because, as you're saying, it is very human centric. And the person is removed from the dangerous situations and has the opportunity to really drive this process because they know it best, but from a safer vantage point because of the robotics that's being used within this process. Very, very interesting. So this is great technology. Can you share a little bit about how you're helping to make robotics technologies be more accessible and more beneficial to manufacturers of all sizes? Because this is not just relegated to the very large organizations. Can you share a bit about how it is becoming more accessible?
Well, that's a great question. And particularly when you're looking at the small and medium-sized enterprises, that's where the challenge is. The big OEMs can do this. They've got the money, they've got the resources, they've got the robots and the training, and they're generally extremely highly automated. What's very hard is the accessibility for the small and medium-sized manufacturers. And that's really, when you think about it, depending on what spec you choose, over 80% or 90% of all manufacturers in the country are small or medium-sized. It's a huge challenge for the country. And they often don't have the time or knowledge or resource to successfully modernize. And if you've worked with some of these small manufacturers, it's hard to get their attention on modernizing because they're just trying to make payroll this week and they don't have time for a conversation. Unfortunately, the reason why they're trying to make payroll this week is they're not modernized and automated. So it's a very kind of vicious catch-22. So one thing we are doing about that, and I think it's a really great model that we hope to cascade across the country, is a few years ago, Southwest Pennsylvania won a $62 million Build Back Better EDA grant to advance robotics in Southwest Pennsylvania for small and medium-sized manufacturers. And part of the reason we got this is that Pittsburgh is really kind of the, a national leader, if not the national leader in robotics, automation, and AI. This whole area around Pittsburgh is it's just palpable how much robotics and automation is everywhere, including autonomous vehicle production and so on. So we won this grant, but the grant was specifically to bring these technologies to small and medium-sized manufacturers that can't otherwise get it. So it's very important to have that public policy of fixing this problem from a public good point of view. So our piece of this is to create what we call the Robotics Manufacturing Hub. And that's installed in our big headquarters building here in Pittsburgh. And what that is a center where we go out, we identify small and medium-sized manufacturers that think they want to automate or are trying to automate and are struggling. By the way, the first thing we do is triage, working with the Manufacturing Extension Partnership in our region, Catalyst Connection, to understand, do they really need robotics and automation, or do they think they do, but it's really something else? And so we work on that first in kind of a triage way. If it turns out that they really shouldn't do robotics, they should do something else to fix their problem, we will hand them off to the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. But if it looks like they need a robot and they just can't get it done, we will bring that problem back to our factory, our headquarters building, the Robotics Manufacturing Hub, and we will work with them, with our consortium. We will figure out a way to de-risk their robotics challenge, and then we will help integrate that back into the manufacturing. So that's a model that we've just begun. We're still working through what's the best way to make this successful. How do you best serve the needs of robotics? For small manufacturers, how do you make sure that they can handle the robot when it's back in there? So lots of elements of this that we're debugging in a sense. But our hope is that this works really well in this region, that our headquarters building becomes the go-to center for small and medium-sized manufacturers to figure out what they do about automation and robotics. And we are a national entity, and we have members all over the country, and they have facilities all over the country. And so we're hoping this works as an experiment, and that we can cascade that in kind of a hub and spokes model across the country and help small and medium-sized manufacturers, throughout the U.S., which again is the vast majority of the manufacturers in this country.
Congratulations on winning that grant. I'm excited to see how this plays out. And actually, speaking of the future, my next question for you is, from your vantage point, working with these startups, the government, the variety of organizations, small, medium, and large, what role do you see robotics playing in the future of manufacturing?
our vision for robotics is, and for the Arm Institute really, is that this is leading the way to a future where people and robots are working together. I think just putting it very simply, the only way we're going to respond to our nation's greatest challenges and to develop and produce the world's best products is an environment where people and robots are working together, where people are using their unique capabilities to do advanced manufacturing, and robots and automation are doing the things that they do well, freeing up humans to do the things that humans should be doing. So that's very simply put, that's the vision. It's a very collaborative, and its use of AI-driven intelligent robots. That's absolutely required. And one of the things I think that a lot of us that have been around this for a long time are a little worried about is that the whole country is in a dialogue about AI and about the ethics of AI and the cautions of AI. And a lot of it is about generative AI. And that is not what we do. We make robots smarter so they can do things humans shouldn't do and free up humans to do other jobs that are desperately needed in an environment in manufacturing where labor force is incredibly scarce. So we need AI in robotics and in manufacturing. And my hope is that all of this probably appropriate discussion about the challenges and dangers of AI don't seep their way into our manufacturing environments, where the future is about intelligent robots and intelligent automation working with human beings in order that we will have, the best manufacturing in the world. And we won't get there without those unique capabilities of those robots.
Thank you for clarifying the difference between like generative AI and the AI within the robotics that you were working with. That I can only imagine that these conversations have been coming up more and more as you've been, hearing so much about generative AI and also, really leading the future of AI within robotics.
Yes. And, the explosion of the discussion around AI and the explosion of AI tools overall, I'm sure will benefit AI in manufacturing. But my hope is that we don't put everything in AI under the same umbrella and under the same kinds of concerns, because we're not talking about some kind of dystopian future of robots and humans. We're talking about advanced manufacturing environments that will be world-class as long as we continue to advance the capability of robots. And by the way, the workforce education that goes along with being able to maintain and operate more intelligent robots. And that just has to go hand in hand.
So what advice would you give to manufacturers and to other industry stakeholders who might be interested in leveraging robotics technologies, using AI responsibly, workforce training programs? What sort of guidance would you pass on to them?
Well, the first thing I would do is get onto our roboticscareer.org website. I know I keep saying that, but what we have there is it's not just robotics jobs that are listed. There's actually award-winning videos about what it's like to do a robotics job, and they're animated, so they're very responsive to younger people about careers in robotics. It talks about what are the competencies required. It talks about what types of jobs are available, what they pay, and the extremely rewarding field that goes in, not just personally in terms of the type of job that you do. That's a very interesting an invigorating kind of job to be doing this, but also financially, it's very rewarding as well. Robotics technicians are greatly needed, and there are great shortage of supply. So it's a great career to be in. And if a technician wants to advance to an engineer role, you can see what that's like in the roboticscareer.org as well. So rather than I try to describe, how do you do this and what is it like, I suggest people get on roboticscareer.org and just look at the videos, read about what robotics jobs are like, look at what type of education is in their region. And if they are interested in joining an institute like the Arm Institute, then we have workshops. We have all kinds of different groups that discuss the various aspects of workforce education, for everything, again, from vocational high school up to PhD programs. And so it's an environment where people can get involved in those kind of discussions and wording as well. But again, we developed that website for that very purpose, to answer that question is, how do you engage? How do you engage this field, particularly from a workforce perspective? And the first step would be to go to roboticscareer.org and then look for assets in your region that are doing this kind of training, kind of workshops and things like that, and kind of go from there.
This has been such a great conversation, so insightful. And I feel like I have to say on behalf of manufacturers everywhere, thank you for inspiring the next generations to pursue a career in such a rewarding industry as manufacturing. So thank you for your great work that you do with the ARM Institute.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity. As you can tell, this is important to me. It's not just important to the ARM Institute. It's important to me personally, having been in U.S. manufacturing my entire professional career and having seen the need over many of those years that we have to bolster our domestic manufacturing. And so it's very important to have these kind of conversations. And I appreciate you doing these podcasts about it to spread the word.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much to my guest, Ira Moskowitz, CEO of the Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing Institute, also known as the ARM Institute. We've included links so you can check out the website that he's mentioned and these resources that are available to you. Again, thank you so much, Ira.
Thank you for having me.
And to everyone listening in, thank you for being a part of the future of manufacturing.